Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you find your unique teaching style. My goal with this podcast is to share helpful tips, strategies, and to give you the motivation you need to gain momentum in your teaching so you can continue being the music teacher rock star you already are. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. You're listening to episode 84, and this episode is an interview with Jessica Grant. And she is going to talk today about how she likes to combine the Orff and Kodaly teaching approaches, and also how she loves to teach music to upper elementary and middle school students. So a little bit more about her before we dive into this interview. She's the middle school music specialist at Good Shepherd Episcopal School in Dallas, Texas. She taught 14 years as an elementary public school music specialist prior to teaching middle school students for the past 4 years. She has taken Dalcroze classes, is certified in Orff Schulwerk, and completed Kodaly Level III this past summer. She earned her Bachelor's of Music and Music Education from Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee, and her Master's of Music and Music Education from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. She's a member of AOSA, OAKE, ARS, and TMEA. She's the host and the creator of the Afternoon Tea, that's TI, podcast, and you can find that on iTunes and Stitcher. So I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. I think what she talks about is so valuable because a lot of teachers, you are either pro Orff, pro Kodaly, and maybe you're a mixture of both of them, but you just don't know how to quite fit the puzzle pieces together. And this episode is going to definitely break that down for you and explain steps and ways that you can begin doing that. But also, I know a lot of teachers listening to this podcast really do struggle with teaching upper elementary and middle school music. So she is just, she's going to drop so many truth bombs on you today. So I am so excited to get started with today's episode with Jessica Grant. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have our guest on today, and this is Jessica. And as you heard me in the podcast intro, I talked a little bit about her, but I would love for her to just tell you a little bit more about herself and why she loves teaching music and all that. So welcome, Jessica, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. So I taught for 14 years in the elementary classroom before coming to my current position, which is as a middle school general music teacher. This is my 5th year teaching middle school, and I absolutely love it. My favorite thing is probably what every teacher loves, and that's the students. I really love impacting students and working with them and just seeing the joy on their face as they get to create and make music. And I really love sharing my passion with them. And honestly, just being with other educators who are also passionate about teaching whatever their area is, because I think that passion really transfers into the entire school and makes up such a wonderful community.
Yes, I love your perspective about teaching music, and I just can tell you have such a joy and a passion for it, which is contagious and very much needed in the music education world.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would love to start our conversation today. We're going to talk about a couple different topics, but one of them is, which I'm sure you get asked this question all the time, is, there's some teachers who are very pro Orff and some are very pro Kodaly, which is totally fine. But for those teachers that enjoy teaching with both methods, I would love for you to just share your perspective and insight about how would you go, or how have you gone about with combining those two teaching methods?
Sure. I will say that the first training I ever had was actually with Dalcroze. I did a week of training at the University of Maryland after my first year of teaching, and I absolutely love using movement with my students. I was a dancer, so I took lots of dance, and incorporating that into my classroom was really important to me, and I just found it really beneficial. And so then after my 4th year of teaching, I went to UNT, University of North Texas, and did the Kodaly Level I there, and learned about the implementation of sequencing and materials for younger students, because it really focuses mostly on like kindergarten and 1st grade sequencing and materials, and the beginning of really how that approach works, building concept upon concept so that it really makes sense to students. And I had planned to do level 2 Kodaly, but ended up not doing it and took some summer off before doing some summer training, honestly, because it can be expensive and time consuming, and with a family and all of that, it can be hard to balance all of that. So it took me a couple of years, and I had the opportunity to either do more of the Kodaly or do Orff training. So I chose to do the Orff training because I didn't know much about it, but I had heard from other friends that was amazing. So I started level 1, and it honestly just changed my life. Like everything just clicked for me, and I really felt like that Orff approach in the process was really, it was like coming home. It's like we were singing and creating and moving and playing instruments, and I just loved all of the variety of the musical experiences and implementing the ideas of composition and improvisation with students. So I actually did levels 1, 2, 3 in my master class for 4 summers, but always came back to feeling like something was still missing with my sequencing and with the concepts and helping students understand how to go from a quarter note all the way to dotted rhythms and mixed meter and all of that. And so I went and completed Kodaly level 2 and 3 courses. In fact, I just finished my level 3 this summer.
Oh, awesome.
And just have to complete that final teaching video and reflection in order to say I'm certified in it. So looking forward to that. But I really found, after using the Orff approach for quite a few years, and now coming back to the Kodaly and having that training, how beautifully they complement each other. And while I continue to work out how that looks, I feel like each year I'm getting better at combining those approaches.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like there is ways to combine it. There is ways to go about approaching teaching music from both methods. And so a music teacher listening to this, maybe they haven't taken any levels or even gone to any Kodaly or Orff trainings or anything. And they're kind of like, okay, well, that sounds great, but how in the world do I do that? How do I decide what to choose? Do you have any suggestions about that? Just how to get started with which one to take first or how to choose that?
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong path for that. I know for me, starting with the Kodaly, I felt like it was so structured and that I didn't have a lot of leeway to choose. But yet now, having gone through all of the levels for 1, 2, and 3, you see that there's choice, but within the structure. It's just a matter of figuring out how that choice looks. And then with Orff, I feel like there's so much choice, but you kind of have to figure out how to structure the choice. It's almost backwards, And so if I were to share where to start, it could look like so many different things. So I think I'll just kind of share, about how I organize it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way I can explain it. Because I think very logically and sequentially and organized. So if I organize it, I like to start with my lesson objectives and my sequence of concepts, and then really focusing on my lesson plan template, because if I know what the daily structure is going to look like and what needs to be accomplished from one class to the next, then I can get the overall picture of how I'm going to get my students to what the big picture is of those bigger concepts. So those areas are really more influenced by my Kodaly training, like looking at what do students already know, what do they need to know next, and then once you get to that next part, then what comes after that. So that's really that musical literacy piece and order of what needs to be taught, which I think the Kodaly sequence is so fantastic in doing, is helping us put an order to what's coming next in our lessons. So my lesson plan template, I have it sequenced so there's a clear beginning to class. And then one of the things I've really worked on is the meaningful transitions between elements. So it doesn't feel like, well, here's a song and here's another song, and then we'll play a game and here's another song, but really having those meaningful rhythmic and melodic transitions or movement transitions so that everything flows. And that just takes time. So if you're just beginning to teach, you might just look at, okay, what concept am I teaching? What are some songs and movement pieces or drumming pieces or barred instrument pieces? What musical elements can I use to teach that concept? And then building a lesson out of that. And then say, for example, once they've learned, 8-note pairs, from there you want to expand and do maybe either separated 8th notes or 16th notes or whatever comes in your your scope and sequence, which hopefully either your district provides, or if you don't have one, definitely ask a friend to see theirs, because oftentimes we can share, and that's helpful. So I think the structure is great for starting there. And like I said, I like flexibility with how the concepts are taught. And Kodaly himself was a strong believer in singing using the voice, because the voice is, the most accessible instrument. And of course, we all carry one around with us. So music that's sung to him was really important, that it be your mother tongue, which is easy in Hungary because they speak Hungarian, a little more challenging with American folk music because we're so diverse. But the Kodaly approach, they use the current hand signs with sight reading and hearing, rhythmic syllables, lots and lots of singing, and then using kind of those three main phases of preparing concepts, presenting what you would call the concept, the shortest portion, where you're identifying what it is, and then practicing that concept, which can go on for ages. So I like to take that structural piece first, and then add in what I'll say, or I consider to be more the Orff approach. Trying to think of the word, the Orff approach pieces, I guess.
Right,
So,
I know what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Karl Orff believed, just like Kodaly did, that singing was important, but he was also a big proponent of using speech as a way to learn music. And so still using that native tongue, but using it to speak and articulate different rhythmic elements. And a strong believer that students should learn through playing. So playing, singing, instruments, movement. And I love using all these elements and concepts that the Kodaly approach through the rhythmic and melodic elements uses, but now exploring them, starting with imitation, having students copy you, so they mimic body percussion patterns or rhythmic elements or singing vocal passages. So they're simply, you do something, they're doing it back. And then from there, they can explore it, and students are guided. So you're still kind of facilitating them through those lessons to how they're exploring it, but now they get to have a taste for choice and exploring that. A lot of this can be put into that practice aspect of the Kodaly outline. And then of course, improvisation. And I'd honestly say composition here as well, because students use what they know and what they've been taught, and then they create new materials. So repeating patterns, using ostinatos and familiar rhythms, or layering rhythmic and melodic elements, creating new movement. And so the best way to share, honestly, how I incorporate the two approaches is just to give you a full outline of a lesson. Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be perfect. Yes.
Okay.
I love that.
Okay.
I love tangible examples. So that'd be great.
Perfect. Because I'm like I said, I think very linear.
Yes,
so I like
that's
to go,
perfect. Yes.
this. So for an example of a lesson that I would do with students, I'll kind of give you the Kodaly outline. When you go through your training, they give you an idea of what each part of the lesson is called. Mm-hmm. And then within that, what I would do in there to kind of incorporate the Orff approach within it. So when you first start a classroom or class period, starting with singing always works well. It just kind of refocuses, gathers students in. It can be folk songs with or without a game, or even doing some kind of body percussion is also a great way to have students come into a room. I love it's like a small book called Rhythmische Übung, and it's honestly lots of rhythmics, body percussion patterns, and you can do it with stationary movement, or you can have students create more locomotor movements to it where they're moving and engaged right away. And then using a transition, whether it's singing the next song that's coming up or having them echo through solfege patterns, and those solfege patterns might pull from the next song that they are going to do, or it may pull from the song you just sang. So making a connection there between what they just did and then what's coming up. And so the Kodaly term for the next part typically would be like a moderate concentration. You don't want it to be very challenging, but you want to get them focused in on a certain part. I typically will do recorder. Mm-hmm. That's a part that we use in the Orff approach is learning recorder. And so I like the blending of them singing the song that they're playing on the recorder, sight reading, using solfege, watching the notes on the staff, and focusing on whatever melodic or rhythmic concept is being practiced, both on the instrument and vocally. So finding specific song material that blends the concept either that they've just learned or that they're about to learn in the present portion of the lesson can be a really practical way to blend the singing of the folk song that had the element and then playing it on the recorder and then incorporating the reading on the staff. And so we would typically do that. And I would add too that adding alto recorder or tenor recorder can be a great way of engaging those older students in this portion of it if you're able to do that, just because it's, I don't know, they're fascinated by instruments that are big and that are small, you know? So if you have that capability, I highly recommend it. And then transitioning again into the high concentration. And this is where it's a great place to present new concepts, or in other words, it's a great place for whatever concept you're working on. Let's say it's quarter note. This is where they would have named it and you would have already practiced it. You would have sung it. You would have played games with it. And all of a sudden you're just going to simply tell them, you get to that point where it's like, this is what we call this. This is how we say it. And then they practice it with other materials following that. I also like to use this high concentration area for specific Orff elements of group work, composition, improvisation, because by now we've spent roughly like 10 to 15 minutes in the lesson, and you're in the middle of the lesson and you've got them at their optimal focusing time. So it's a great way of taking that time to do some group composition or teaching them how to improvise and just incorporating more instrumental ensembles. I find that to be a great time in the middle of the lesson to do that. And then from there, transitioning again, using poems is a great way. Something, if you've got instruments out, something where they can speak it, because obviously their hands are full of instruments or pushing carts and things. So you don't want body percussion because they can't do that with their hands, but something where they're resetting and speaking it so that you've still got their attention while things are going away. And then leading into a moderate concentration, which is a great place for practicing the element, switching to a musical game or a folk dance or something that takes a little less, I'll say, brain power, but that allows them to really joyfully make music. And then from here, transitioning to the closing. And I will say the closing is something that's one of the hardest parts for me, because I want to end class well, but oftentimes I find like we're ending the game or we're ending this folk song and it's like, oh, it's time to go. Thank you for a great class. And so something, something I want to work on is being able to have more time for reflection, and either, even older students love it when you, I'll say, read or sing books to them. They really love that, even though they'll act too cool for it sometimes, but they're always like so engaged with it when it happens. So finding something that works well to really have them thoughtfully end class works well. But I find the structure, really outlining that lesson plan structure, really opens it up so that you can have the creativity and the freedom to move between the elements and incorporate the instruments and the movement and drumming and all of those things that are so important for students to do. But maybe looking at a Kodaly outline, you'd go, oh, well, where do you fit it in? But it is possible. And the kids really like it to be predictable, but they also enjoy going, oh, what are we doing next? Or what, are we going to play drums today? Or are we going to play hard instruments or whatever? So it gives a little freedom there, which I think is really important for older students.
Oh, I love all that. Thank you so much for giving us that tangible example and breaking it down so much, because I love this. I have always said to my listeners that I think however you choose to teach music is, everyone's unique. You have your unique teaching style and classroom, but I know so many teachers who like you do, like bringing in different approaches and different styles of teaching and want to incorporate movement and recorder and all the things, but don't know how to. And one thing you said that I could relate to, when I took my Orff level, I remember, get this huge binder, which you do at any level for Kodaly or Orff. Yes. And it's great, don't get me wrong, but then you after the level's done, you go back and look at the materials you already have and you're like, well, wait, when do I work this in where? And so, like you said, the Kodaly method, kind of breaks it down and has a structure for you, but you can Orff into that, and you have activities that you've already done that. I love that you said that, because I find a lot of times thrown into these elementary music rooms, like my experience was I didn't have any resources and I didn't know where to start. I didn't have a teacher to follow. And so I didn't have a curriculum map at first. And so it was kind of just, I don't know what to teach when, and it gets confusing. And so having a framework to follow and then being able to plug, different things into that, I think is so important. And I love that suggestion you gave.
Good. And it can be challenging at first because I think it takes time. I mean, this is my 19th year of teaching and I still don't feel like I have it all figured out. I still am growing and still figuring out how to work all the elements in and try to stay on a scope and sequence. And I think we need to give ourselves grace to go, okay, depending on where the students are, they might be at more of if we're teaching third grade, they might be at more of a second grade level of where their learning is, being able to take them where they really truly are compared to where we really think they should be or could be if they had experience before. And so just giving yourself grace to go, okay, this year I'm going to try this, and maybe I'll just take one element and build that grade level up, and then the next year build the next grade level up, and not feeling overwhelmed that everything has to be done perfectly in every grade right away, because that, I know it didn't happen for me. It takes time to learn.
Yeah, it's in your head, the way you want it to go.
Yes.
Once you get in there and start doing it. And also the same thing, give yourself grace when it comes to teaching and implementing the lessons, because like you mentioned about closing out the lesson, well, you see how long do you see your students?
So mine, I have a really unique schedule because I teach middle school 5th through 8th grade. I see them every 4 days out of 6 for 70 minutes, which is awesome. So I see them long, but I only see them for 3 months of the year.
Oh, wow.
So I'll see them I see them starting Wednesday, and I'll see them through mid-November, but then I won't see them again, those students, until the next fall.
Oh, wow.
So they have that 9-month break in there, which can be a challenge, so I see them for longer periods for sure. And I see them that's quite a bit of time, but as far as the longevity of it is very short, which is a different scenario than when I taught elementary school and saw them once a week for 15 minutes. It's a different challenge.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And so I feel like it's give it back to the giving yourself grace. I feel like it's a process when it comes to lesson planning, whether you teach early elementary, upper elementary, middle school, with anything, is knowing how long to plan your lessons for.
Yes.
I've been guilty of over planning. I've been guilty of under planning. And so when it comes to closing out the lesson, a lot of times you don't realize how much time's gone by because you've done so much in that class, which is a good thing. You're like, oh wait, I did have a closing, but I was going to ask some questions to, see who's been paying attention and things, but I ran out of time, and that happens. But like you said, give yourself grace, because it is so important that you're not like, oh, well, I didn't get to the closing again, or, oh, I meant to do more, mallet instruments today and I never got to them. It's okay. The goal here is to teach your kids music, and don't stress out if you're not getting to all the things that you want to get to right away. Because like you said, it takes time. Well, I would love to, speaking of teaching 5th to 8th grade music, I would love to pick your brain about what it's like to teach older music. Wow. To teach music to older students of that age group. This is something I get asked about pretty much the most is, well, when it comes to 4th and 5th grade in elementary, but 5th to 8th grade too. There's a lot of teachers that listen to those podcasts that teach K all the way to 12, through private school or, a small district. And so just tell us all the things. What is it like teaching that age group, and what are some awesome lesson ideas you have, or anything you'd like to share about that?
Sure. So I will, first of all, I'll say I never thought I'd teach middle school. It was kind of always I'm scared of them. Like they're going to be moody, or they're going to make me cry, or I don't know. I felt like so insecure about it.
Yes.
And now teaching it, I'm like, man, I can't imagine teaching anything else. So I feel like God put me just right where I need to be. Well, I know he did, but as far as teaching older students, it can be hard because I find the hardest grade level, at least for me personally, is whatever my oldest student population is. So in elementary school, when I taught K through 5, my 5th graders were hard for me. And now that I teach 5th through 8, my 8th graders, I'll say, are hard for me. I love them to pieces, but it can be hard. And I think part of it is because they're old enough that they've been there for a while. Like the 5th graders in elementary school have been there. They've been there since kindergarten. This is their 6th year there. And they don't have those freedoms that come with what's ahead of them in the next school. And they're anticipating leaving the school and starting over and having change. And so it can be hard because it's like we've spent all this time building them up to where they are now and not quite sure how to take them further because we know they are going to change next year. And so one of the things that's helped me is with my oldest students who are ready for a change is to save some special, and this will sound maybe silly, but like save some special musical pieces that are only for that grade level. Even some of your favorite games and some of the instruments. If you're blessed to have lots of different instruments, then keeping back even just a couple of percussion instruments that are like, oh, cool, that they've never played before, just something fresh and new that they haven't done before can really keep them engaged because it's something new and they love that. And then other things that I found that works well, at least for me, has been performing a pop song on barred instruments and helping guide them through that process of learning how chord structures work and then building ostinato patterns based off the chords and the roots and then learning the melody to it, incorporating singing with it. That's been a huge hit because it relates to something that they understand. And even though I wouldn't say that's necessarily a huge part of the Orff approach, it is one way of kind of engaging those older students. And then another thing is giving them responsibility, whether they seem like they want it or not, they really do. So guiding them to direct their peers, having a student keep a steady beat on a cowbell or shekere for barred or drum pieces and asking them or, choosing them to come up and direct the pieces and having them call in the different parts. That's a huge thing because they want the responsibility. They want to be seen honestly as adults, but just as older students, they don't like feeling talked down to or like you're talking to them like a child because they see themselves as so big, and so
right.
Honestly, they're changing so much mentally, physically, emotionally, but they're still kids and they still love joyful things. They love funny things and trying to find things that really keep their attention and build in that desire for them to give effort. And so it's kind of this thing where they want to be leaders, but they want to fit in with their peers. And they don't want to stand out too much, but at the same time, they do want to please you, but they're not predictable in their moods and their friendships are constantly changing and their effort because of their moods. Sometimes they've been on their iPhone too late at night, so they're super tired in the morning, and then, all through those changes, they really need us to be predictable so that when they come into our music room, they know we're not just going to snap, at them or something because of a look they're giving us or, I'm not saying they should be disrespectful and that you should just take it, but you know what I mean? It's like they need us to be predictable that when they come in, they know we're going to greet them joyfully. They know that we're going to have plans for them and that we're going to find this balance of material as well. And that's another thing that I have found really helps them is finding material that piques their interest and that isn't too easy or too hard, the things that they can relate to, like the pop music. You don't have to do all pop pieces, but bringing in even just one can make a huge difference. And then another thing that I found that helps is finding pieces where you can help those students who struggle with music basics, like steady beat or singing in tune, while also motivating those really high performing students where you can find ways to challenge them, where maybe they're playing a rhythm and then you go, you know what, okay, now add these 16th note patterns every time you play this pitch, or why don't you try that again, but see if you can create a passing tone somewhere in that melody, so finding ways to extend it for those students. But I mean, they really do want us to push them. They really do want to be able to trust us and trust that we're going to be very predictable in our behavior and in what we do. And also that we're not going to just let them get by. They want to be better, despite whether their facial expression says it or not. So those are the things that come to mind as far as helping us with older students.
Yeah. So those teachers listening who struggle with their older students, do you feel like a big part of the struggle goes back to the relationship part of it, where not that they necessarily have a bad relationship with their students, but maybe they're just struggling to connect, and maybe they're just struggling, they're dealing with behavior issues and the attitudes and the ever-changing hormones or whatever.
Right.
It's just hard. Maybe they just don't know how to relate. And, middle schoolers, I do feel like get a bad rap.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you said, that's exactly my viewpoint kind of is like, oh my gosh, middle schoolers are like, I know so many teachers that say that I can never teach that age group. But it's almost like until you get in there and do it, you probably just don't realize how much you really will like it. So the teachers listening who they're saying, well, I'm really struggling with teaching my older kids, whether it's 5th grade for them or 8th grade, would you just say, just give it time and try to really foster that relationship part of things?
Yeah, I think relationships are huge. And I have a daughter who's in 7th grade. So it's like I am now walking through that middle school period of hearing it from her side as well. And I do have her in my class. So, that's another whole element of seeing how she relates to me. And she does fantastic. But it's just one of those things where hearing from her side and her going, this teacher noticed this about me, or they noticed that I was trying today even though I was tired, or her talking about, I really loved this in music class today when we got to create on this part because we were talking with friends, or her just sharing her outlook and getting it from a middle schooler herself as one side of it. But I think also, those relationships, you just can't discount taking the time to really understand where that child is coming from. We recently had Dave Molek come and talk to our faculty, and he talks a lot about just relationships in general, but he had some really great conversation starters about, tell me, similar to the Brené Brown comment about, the story I'm telling myself, or things like that. But it was lead-ins, tell me a little bit more about how you feel about that. Well, why does that bother you? Or why do you think you're thinking so much about that? And I find if I just I know it's hard to find that time. It really is, because our schedules are so jam-packed, but finding just a moment to say, hey, I noticed, you seemed a little more agitated today. Can you tell me the story about that? And taking time, you never know what a child is going through at home, or what happened in the class before they got to you. And sometimes I know I have taken things personally where it's like, oh, they just hate music class, or they just can't stand to be here. When in reality, they were like, oh, somebody at recess, knocked me over during the football game and hurt my pride in front of my friends. And now I'm embarrassed and I'm going to class, and I'm just still embarrassed thinking about that, but it comes off a different way in class.
Right.
So taking that time to really get from them, what's going on? What are you thinking about? Can I help you with that? Is there anything you need from me? That can be huge. And sometimes you can go to the parents and have a conversation about what's going on in class, but sometimes they don't have a family support system where you can access them like that. And so being an advocate for that student and really building that relationship of, I care about your musical learning, but I care about you as a person more, and building that. I've found I've made some really great headway with students. Sorry, the dog just barked. I've made some really great headway with in that area by just letting them know that and obviously being sincere about it, not just saying it to say it, but really showing them that you care and that you do this job because you love them and you care about their growth. And of course you love music and you want to teach them that, but relationship is a huge aspect, especially with older students.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. So don't be intimidated if you're teaching older kids and just intimidated because they're middle schoolers. And like you said, I love the part that you said about sometimes you feel like, oh, they just hate music class, or they're not connecting in here, or this is just not their thing. But a lot of times it really isn't the case. And, and it's just sometimes just give those kids patience and give time, but really just the simple, how are you today? Or can I do anything for you? Or do you need to tell me anything? Goes a long way, because you're exactly right. There's a lot of kids that don't have anyone asking them those questions ever. And you think because they're older that they don't still need those questions asked of them, that they have bigger emotions and feelings probably than our elementary kiddos do, and so.
Right. It's kind of like when you get, and well, maybe you don't, but when I get, I think the worst argument I've ever had with my husband was kind of over a newspaper, but it wasn't really like over the newspaper. It was all these other things underneath it,
True.
So the same thing with students in our classroom, where they can appear to be angry because they didn't get the instrument part, but really something else happened. And then this was the tipping off point, was that they didn't get the instrument, but it's really not about the instrument. So it can take, it's almost like you're a counselor to some degree, but obviously that takes more degrees than what I have, but just simply caring enough to go, I'm going to take a step back, not take it personally, and really just ask a simple question of, really, how are you today? Like, how are you? Or, all those things about pulling out answers that can't be answered with just, oh, I'm fine, or yes, or no,
True. Oh, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when you see someone you haven't seen in a while and you say, how are you? And they're like, good. And then you just all keep walking on your merry way. It's the biggest pet peeve of mine. But anyways. Well, I would love to hear some of your favorite activities to teach to upper elementary and middle school students. Any of your favorite activities, whether it's drumming, singing, what do you enjoy doing with those kiddos?
Everything. I love everything.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I love doing with students, and I think because obviously it's hands-on, but they can create so much. They can use speech, they can incorporate movement and improvisation, is drumming. There are so many great resources out there, but it's also fairly simple to create building blocks using like 2 quarter notes, a quarter note and a pair of eighth notes, or 2 pairs of eighth notes, using those to guide students towards composition and improvisation, and having them add speech to it. And in Elementaria by Gunhild Katemann, she does a great job outlining some building blocks towards the beginning of the book. And there are a couple, I have quite a few drumming resources, but my favorites for upper elementary and then middle school would have to be Jim Solomon's books like Conga Town, and Chris Judah Lauder's resources. She's got some Candy Conga and just some amazing resources, and they give you such fabulous outlines, but also using a lot of speech and guidance for how you can take those pieces and add more to it, and also include some different percussion parts. So I love drumming for sure. And then body percussion is also something that my first few years teaching middle school, I kind of shied away from because I wasn't quite sure how they'd take it. And every year I'm getting more comfortable incorporating it with them because I'm more comfortable teaching middle school. So it took me some time. But I mentioned the Rhythmische Übung. There are also these cool online videos of body percussion that I found. And I've actually done this piece before with my students, but it's Shostakovich's Waltz. And there's this cool body percussion created by Santi Saratosa Lopez. And it's usually one female and one male. And I'll send you the links if you want to post them at all, because they've got playlists. But it's so cool because it's somewhat complicated in parts, but you can definitely simplify it if it's too hard. And so they've got some cool body percussion ideas, and you can really make them accessible for students. And something I love about it too is that, typically like in the Orff levels, a lot of times we did body percussion and we might use some speech or some vocal noises, but I never really thought of doing body percussion to recorded music. And not saying that's an Orff thing, but I just personally love it. And so it's nice because they took some pop music, and you can take these body percussion pieces and the students are sitting, or they can stand, or they've got some where you're in partners and moving. But I just thought their pieces were really, really creative. And so that's something that I really enjoy doing with my students. And then anything percussion, literally anything they can hit, shake, whatever they can do. Anything with sticks, mallets, cowbells, the quirkier the percussion instrument, the better. Like they love the ratchet, anything that they can twist and, the vibroslap, all of those cool things. And then the music for children volumes are like invaluable. There's so many great gems. And something I love that I think Orff training really helps with is learning how to take the melodies and rhythms within the volumes and then creating your own text to them, or having students create text, or you can even simplify them or double the rhythms, or add singing. You can transfer them to the barred instruments or play them on hand drums, or creating bordunes or rhythmic ostinato on unpitched percussion. So I just feel like the volumes are just so worth using, because you can do so much with just this one book of pieces, and it allows for students to create, and students love that. And then there's really only two other ones that I can think of for now, and that is games. And honestly, I don't do enough games, because I figure, we're middle school, we should move past the games and just learn theory or just learn concepts. But after the Kodaly III training, I realized, I need to incorporate more games. And by that, I mean like meaningful music games that include musical concepts they're working on, because students who, especially in middle school, don't feel comfortable singing, or I will hear them say, oh, I'm not a singer, I can't sing. And that bothers me, because it's like, we all can sing. But in our the United States right now, it's like all of us look at, well, somebody on this TV show can sing, but I'm not a singer. Right. Or parents will even come up and say, well, he doesn't sing, but and it's like, no, he really can. Yeah, right. So those students who don't think they can sing will feel really safe singing if it's in a game environment where they're not really the center of attention, and they just allow for students to feel more comfortable. So incorporating singing games is great. And then the last one is really anything that allows them to interact with their peers, because honestly, the older students, they are going to talk. So it's like, what do you want them to talk about? Tomorrow's football game, or about creating music? And so make their talk productive by giving them things to talk about, whether it's a pair and share where you ask something about concept and they have to share, or whether they're creating a drumming piece and they have to decide what text they're going to add to a rhythm, but just something where the talking is purposeful, because they are going to talk. Yes. So those are things that have been successful with my students.
Yes, that's awesome. And I know that ties directly into classroom management, is that the relationship aspect, but not just with you, but with each other, which is huge, is forming a sense of community in the music room. But along with that, I would love for you to share other classroom management tips as well that you have for older kids.
Sure. And I'll say this is something that I continue to work on as well. I don't have this completely all down or all figured out, but these are the things that I continue to work on and do my best at. And along with the talking and having them talk purposely about something, is keeping them moving, having no downtime. And something I really worked on last year was my transitions, because I found by having those focused, purposeful transitions, it doesn't give them time in between song 1, song 2 to do anything except transition and stay right with me. So just keeping them moving, it's kind of like what you had mentioned earlier too, about over planning, under planning, just, that takes time as well, figuring out your length of time and how you teach and the structure of that. But just keeping them going through class can really help with the classroom management. And then something, again, that I continue to work on is do doing what I say I'm going to do. So I always say I try to be consistently consistent, because if students know I'm going to follow through with the expectation set, then they stop testing and they know, or they keep testing, but they know that I'm going to follow through on, if you play while I'm talking, your marks are going to go down, or, if you're blurting out, then such and such a thing is going to happen. So that's one that the middle schoolers and the older students, they like to push those boundaries and say, okay, so she said she's going to do this. Will she really do it?
Right.
And working to be consistently consistent. And then another thing that really helps with classroom management is giving them responsibilities and trusting them with it, and not taking over to where it's like, well, I'll get that for you. You can go get a different instrument. I'll get this for you and set it out. Instead, like in my classroom, they're in charge of getting out the drums, and they know which drum they're in charge of and where it goes. They're in charge of getting the whole barred instrumentarium set up, so they know which instruments they're in charge of, where it goes, how the mallets are set up, and then they know what to do next. But they like responsibilities. They like being leaders. I kind of talked about that earlier, but just giving them responsibilities and then not taking over from them, really letting them lead.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that so much. One thing I want to add about classroom management is I feel like with classroom management, it is a work in progress, just like with lesson planning and just like everything we talked about. But on top of that, it's okay to, if something's not working, it's not set in stone. Your classroom management plan can change, but also what I've noticed too is certain things that work, and I wanted to know if this happens in middle school as well, but certain things that work with one class, you get another 7th grade class completely different. And you're like, well, that doesn't work with them. Does that happen in middle school as well as elementary?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh yeah. Because you'll have one class where the personalities react. It's like, you have a signal for them to focus. And I don't even know, for some reason, it's like the kids they hear that, they know, and, they'll listen. And then other classes, it just doesn't faze them. So you have to come up with some kind of new, entertaining way to get their attention, and it changes. I mean, it changes depending on grade level and depending on, for me, by trimester, just knowing those students and what they need. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's good to know. So it's kind of like all around, depending on what class comes in. Isn't that funny how different classes have different dynamics of personalities? And it's honestly like you have to get to know those kids first and the way that class fits together before you can kind of develop a classroom management plan. So yeah. Well, before we go, I would love for you to share any advice you have in general for any elementary music teacher, middle school music teacher listening to this.
Oh gosh. So many things I could say, but I think the most important thing I could say is know that you matter, know that what you do matters, and be encouraged that God has you where you are for a reason, and just trust that what you're doing is impacting those students. And like we said earlier, give yourself grace. I mean, we all work so hard, and we can be so hard on ourselves about, well, we didn't get to this concept, or, this class didn't go so well, or, gosh, I don't know how to reach that one student. And just know that what you're doing matters. And like I said, who you are as a person matters. So I'd encourage you to just keep at it, and, just keep focused on where you are and working where you are, because you are making a difference. So I think that's something I need to remind myself of, and I think all teachers need to be encouraged that just you're doing a great job, and then I would say, if you're not sure how to do something, or you have this idea of something that you want to do, but you're not quite sure exactly how it might work, or you need help thinking it through, I'd say ask another music teacher, even reach out through Instagram, or to a teacher you trust in your district, or, to either one of us, ask away, because all of us, I find that music teachers really love sharing and going and mulling over, things that other teachers are thinking of and going, and try this, or what about this? And so if you're having a hard time figuring out exactly how an idea might work out, ask, because there's lots of people who want to help. And then take advantage of trainings near you. I know I am the music teacher I am today because of all the teachers who taught me and influenced me. And there's local Orff and Kodaly chapters, and by joining those, a lot of times, a year or two in, you can apply for scholarships toward level courses that could honestly change the trajectory of your career and just your passion, and renew that. And then my last really advice is take risks. You want to incorporate drums, but you've got them, but you've never done it before. Ask for ideas and then try it out, and be willing to possibly risk failing, because a lot of times the things that I've been insecure about and gone, gosh, I don't know how to do this, or, I'm not sure it's going to go so well. Some of my best ideas and my lessons have come from taking risks, and some of those have come from totally failing in class and asking the students, okay, what didn't work about this? What did we learn? Okay, and then taking notes. And as a teacher, especially because you're older students, they will tell you if it worked or not. They'll be like, yeah, that was bad. But going, okay, so I took a risk today, so what did we learn out of this risk, and what might facilitate it better, and how do you see this? And sometimes the students have some really awesome ideas of, well, maybe let's try it with partners instead of with the whole class. So you do, and not giving up too easily, but also realizing when something has gone not so well and going, okay, that really didn't work, so let's just go back to the drawing board, maybe move on to something else. But be willing to take risks and know that it's worth learning from, because you never know, your best idea might come from that risk.
Oh my goodness. So good. Thank you so much, Jessica, so much for this episode. It's been amazing. I would love for you to let everybody know where they can find you so they can connect with you after this episode.
Absolutely. So I'm on the Afternoon Tea podcast, spelled T-I like music. So you can find that on iTunes and Stitcher. And then on Instagram, I'm at High Afternoon Tea, spelled T-I. And then if you want to find me on Facebook, it's Jessica Morrison Grant. And so I'm happy to talk with you. And I just truly am so honored to have been asked to be on the podcast and share about my passion and finally get to talk to you. I really loved it.
Yes, this has been an amazing interview, and I will include all those links in the show notes, so you guys make sure to connect with her, because Jessica is amazing, and really enjoyed having you on the podcast, and thank you so very much.
Gosh, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.